Hello. It's the Monday after a long weekend, so I'm very excited for all of you that have managed to attend, and we're gonna let a bunch of other people join us. And while we do that, we're gonna have a few minutes of administration. So what's happening at Amplify? Always lots, right? So a couple things. We are wrapping up this season with June's AHA with Amplify. I cannot believe that we are done our third season of AHA with Amplify, but we are. As you know, we take July and August and December off. So June will be the season ender, and we're going to be talking with a human resources specialist, Kristen Straight, with us next June, third Tuesday of June. So that will be the last webinar session of the year. Very excited to have all of you join. Human resources is obviously very key to every business. I always say that every business is a people business, and especially the businesses that we work with where processes and automation are scaling up and getting developed. And at the end of the day, they're even more dependent on people than a typical business. So absolutely very excited to talk to Kristen and have some practical understanding of some of the employment laws, some of the HR best practices, and a whole bunch of other important topics when it comes to one of the most important parts of our business, people. So that's the third Tuesday of June, and we are excited to have the season end with Kristen in HR. We also have our birthday party. So many of you have already registered, and Joe will make sure that it's in the chat so that if you haven't registered, that you get that opportunity. It's exclusive to AHA members, business affiliates, alumni, candidates, and clients, but it is a very large and exciting celebration. We are 5+ years old here at Amplify. We're really, really excited that we've made that milestone, and we want to make sure that we use it as an opportunity to celebrate and to thank all of you that supported us over the first 5 years. And I'm sure that we can anticipate having many more years to come of your support and your excitement. And we're super happy to be celebrating that May 30th, that last best. And we've got the patio. Hopefully the weather is a hell of a lot better than it has been lately. And we'll have a really great opportunity to thank you and to share our 5+ year celebration with you. So those are two of the great things that are coming here at Amplify. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan to talk about today's session. So today we're doing the personal CFO session. Every year we like to have at least one session that's about our personal finances, because so many of us are business leaders and finance leaders, and we're focused on everybody else's money and everybody else's financial strategy that we can forget about our own. But yet at the end of the day, that's so critical to our families and our careers and our succession. So we're really happy to take a minute out for ourselves and to think about our own personal CFO and what we could be using advisors for, what we could be doing better, and all kinds of tips and tricks that Ryan's going to help us with. Ryan's a fellow CPA. He was formerly on the board of FEI and a member of FEI. I think he was also on the board of CPA Alberta. And we know him through all these different angles. I actually found out the other day that David and Ryan have gone on trips together, apparently for his bachelor party back in the day. So there's all kinds of history and connections with Ryan. So we're super excited that he's here to share his expertise. He's also a member of Jan Eden's club, we call it. I don't know what we call it actually, Ryan, but whatever it is. I think that's how we originally met, was through Jan. I know he's had our own alumni, Tyler, on his podcast recently. He's going to have myself on his podcast at some point soon. So lots and lots of interactions and support and excitement with Ryan, and very happy to spend the next 60 to 90 minutes learning from Ryan. Thank you for being here, and I'll let you get at it.
Thanks, Jamie. Just going to share my screen with everyone. Perfect. So we're going to start off with a story today. The year was 1962, the year of the Cuban Missile Crisis, the closest the world has ever come to nuclear war. The boy was woken up in the middle of the night with a knock on the door. It was time to run. A journey begins with a single step. In Vlad's case, it was the 7,600 kilometers from former Yugoslavia to Winnipeg, Manitoba, crossing the Atlantic by boat, escaping Tito's oppressive communist regime. He doesn't speak the language, he's never seen snow, and he wasn't sure what would happen next. By the time Vlad was 12, he became the man of the house, looking after a newborn, making money to put food on the table. Have you ever heard the phrase, "It's not about the cards you're dealt, but it's how you play them"? After experiencing a struggle in his family, Vlad decided when he grew up, he wanted to be a good dad. Not an astronaut or a fighter, a dad to build a better life for his kids one day. He knew to build a better life, he'd have to discover the inner workings of money and wealth. So he started as a mail clerk at the Canada Revenue Agency. And he worked his way up without any formal education to become a taxation auditor, to learn how money was made and also hid. There was no better way to study how wealth could be created and lost. These principles he learned about money helped him achieve his vision of building a better life for his family. On many long walks down Westmount Drive in Winnipeg, he taught these 4 principles to his oldest son. And those are: 1, be true to yourself and your values. Number 2, work smarter and not harder. Number 3, save a bit of every dollar you make. And number 4, surround yourself with people smarter than you. Now, Unstoppable Journey starts with a vision. And it was my father's vision to build a better life for his family that not only defined his life, but also inspires me in my vision to continue on the legacy and build a better life for my family and help others do the same. So normally this kind of workshop or presentation is done in person. We would break out in groups right now. But as I'm talking, think about what separates you and people you know in your life from feeling trapped versus free. Now, that could be around money, that could be around time, that could be around health, people, relationships, you name it. Think about, what makes people feel trapped versus free. And as we're talking about today, I highly encourage everybody, either take a pen and paper on the side or a notepad open on your computer or laptop and make some notes, because the goal and intention for this conversation is not just to learn another, fact or a tidbit about personal finance. It's to actually take an actionable item at the end of this hour, hour and a half to improve your life and your family's life. So think about what's stopping you, right? What's stopping you from achieving everything you want in life? And usually there are a couple barriers or roadblocks that people need to get over. So put a label to them, call them out, write them down. Again, A, B, C, what are some of the roadblocks that you're dealing with right now that's stopping you from living the full life you want to do? In this talk today, we're going to talk about, 4 big problems that are roadblocks or impacts for a lot of Canadian families. So I've spoken with hundreds of different people, varying industries, backgrounds, and these 4 problems keep on coming up. So we're going to talk about what those 4 problems are today, and I'll share with you a solution for each one of these 4 problems. So the first big problem that comes up is poor planning. And what that really means is not having a clear and written vision written down with an actionable list of items that you need to perform this month, this year, this decade to achieve it. Sometimes financial planning, people will be like, yeah, I have a financial plan, and I'll ask them, where is it? And it's like, oh, it's on my bookshelf somewhere, right? That's not really planning. If you're not reviewing the plan, if you can't talk openly in a few sentences about it and knowing what you do to do next, not a actionable, effective plan for the person. So FP Canada, which is the organization in Canada that governs certified financial planners, conducted a study. And they found out that 3 out of 4 Canadians surveyed don't have a professional financial plan. And further in the study, they went on to uncover how many Canadians feel that they're confident they'll be able to achieve their financial goals. And almost half did not feel confident they were able to achieve their financial goals. And the 2 findings are directly correlated. And the point is, if you don't have a clear financial plan or pathway or roadmap in order to achieve your goals, it is much more difficult to actually achieve them. So, question for everyone watching right now. Who thinks having a clear vision of what you want to accomplish will help you achieve that? Normally when I'm doing this section live, everyone puts their hand. I think that's pretty much universal. Most people would agree, yeah, having a clear vision will help you achieve what you want to achieve. The next question you need to ask yourself then is, do you have a clear personal vision statement written down? And this is usually where I hear crickets or a lack of anything. So why the disconnect between belief and action? If someone believes that having a clear vision will help them achieve it, and you have businesses around the world sharing their vision statement and mission statement. Why are we as people not writing down our own personal vision statement to help us achieve that? So we're going to change that today. So to write a clear vision statement, first we understand the foundation, which is really values. And values are really what is most important to you. Okay. And the vision is then based off your values. So think about your core values as we talk about values and vision. And again, write them down. Can be on a side of piece of paper or on your computer. What are your top values? What's most important in your life? And then once you have your values, think about what is your vision of what you're working to achieve. I generally don't have clients or families that I'm working with say, Ryan, we want to have X amount of millions, and if we die with that in the bank, we're going to be the happiest people ever. No, it's usually a much broader or more specific statement about their family, themselves, community, the world. What do you actually want to achieve? Now, there can be a financial number that needs to get tied back to that. But really, what are you working towards? What does success look for you is another way of saying this. So Jamie, maybe we'll take a quick, couple of second or minute pause here just to let people write down what their core visions statements are for themselves. So at the end of this chat, hopefully everyone listening will at least have their personal vision statement written down. And if people don't know or they've never really thought about it before, my recommendation is just to start writing. It can be a journey, it's a draft, it doesn't have to be perfect at the end of this chat, but the important thing is to write something down. Get the kind of juices flowing, the creative juices flowing in your brain and start as a starting point.
Awesome. I always laugh because one of the great things about being an entrepreneur and owning your business is that you have it written down because your businesses and your own happen to match because you founded the business. But obviously, most of our listeners aren't necessarily founders and co-founders that have that opportunity to put it on a wall and to share it and talk about it every day. And so certainly a lot of us get so busy that we haven't necessarily taken the time to write it down.
Absolutely. And even with business owners, I spend a lot of time talking to business owners, and they might have their corporate or their business vision written down, but a lot of the time they get so busy with business, just like professionals and employees, you get so busy with business, life, children, hobbies, you name it, that the personal finance side doesn't get as much time and attention put into it. So important even for business owners as well to have that personal vision statement down, not just their corporate vision statement, and they don't have to be the same. So the quote on the screen right now is actually, I lifted this from a coach that I met a little while ago in California at a conference. And what she said was, when your vision is clear, your decisions are easy. And the first time I heard that, to be honest with you, it kind of went right over my head. It's like, yeah, vision's important. I get that, decisions, it will help with decisions, make sense, move on. It wasn't until a little while later that it really just clicked. And this one sentence or this one quote right here, I think is one of the most powerful phrases I might have ever heard in my life. Because once it actually clicks and you have your clear vision written down, and you could later break that out into milestones, but the decisions absolutely become easier. Decisions on what to do in career, in life, in family, with finances, all of these decisions that we make daily, weekly, monthly, annually, sometimes they become difficult, and they are often complex decisions. But the biggest driver quite often of the complexity is because we don't know really where we're headed. People want to retire one day. People want to have more money. People want to have freedom and flexibility, generally at a very high level, but that's not a vision, right? So once you really fine tune your vision on what you're actually working towards and breaking that down in mile steps, then as these decisions come up, you look back to your vision, your milestones, and say, okay, well, what do I need to do to make sure I'm on track for that vision and milestone? And then quite often the answer becomes really clear and really simple. So want to share that with everyone as well. When your vision is clear, your decisions become easier. The other important part is quite often when it comes to personal finances or wealth creation, many people think wealth building is a chronological process. start with A, then you go to B, save monthly, put into your RSPs and TFSAs, and eventually have enough money to retire and all as well. In reality, it is much easier and much more effective to start at the end. Work backwards. Start at Z. Again, tying back to this vision component. What does success look like for you and your family? And then identify the milestones that you need to achieve 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years before that, right? Much easier to work that way versus the opposite. So as people have written down, hopefully now their vision statement, reflect and think about your decisions and actions today, this month, this year. Are they reflective of the vision that you just wrote down? Okay, we all make many decisions quite often. So think about it. Are they reflective? Are they in line? Or is there opportunities to increase alignment? Be more intentional with your decisions and actions as it relates to their vision. So as an example, if we think about this, if health is a core value and part of your vision, how many times a week do you work out or exercise? How do you focus on your diet? And how do you make decisions around that? What other health decisions and actions are you making to promote that vision and value? Or is health really important to you, but other things get in the way and there is an opportunity to be more intentional? So knowing and living by your core values and vision is really the foundational starting point to taking control and living the life you want. First, knowing with certainty what your values and vision is, have it written down on paper or have it written down on the computer right now. There's a very powerful component of writing it down versus just thinking about it, right? We have so many thoughts and so many competing thoughts in our head. It's really important to write it down. And the other aspect of that is writing it down helps you improve, version 1 to version 1,000, right? And values and vision is quite often not okay, I wrote it down, we're done now. It can morph, it can change. If you have a spouse and you're talking to them, connecting the two visions together potentially. Maybe they are closely aligned, maybe they're not. But as life changes, change is one of the very few constants in life. So it's important that you have a track and a record and you can move with it. So once you have your core vision and your values, the next component, and this is often quite missed, is what are the milestones that you need to achieve that? Okay, we learned about this, I think, in grade school, having SMART goals, right? So specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-based. So put those in there. If financial freedom, or there's a multitude of different words for it, is part of your components. What actually is that? When do you want to have financial freedom by? What is, after-tax spending that you'd be comfortable with? If time is in there, how much time do you need? What would you do with that time? If it's making a difference in your community, in your family, in the world, what is that difference? And what are you going to do to achieve that? So try and break that down, be a bit more granular. As I'm talking about this slide and the next slide, I recommend just keep on writing down as we're talking about this and write down your goals that you need to achieve. So all this happens before you even start the traditional personal financial planning model. I think that's one of the big gaps and roadblocks a lot of people have is they might not have a personal financial plan, but B, if they do start to create one without having the foundational work done with values and vision and those critical milestones, working with yourself or any financial professional, really difficult to develop a plan to achieve something that's not clear at the starting point. Once you have that clear values vision and you're now starting to create your roadmap of what you need to do, monthly, annually, so forth, it should be really easy to see. So this is just an example on the screen of 5 milestones that a client had. One was retirement. Another was around education for their children. Third was around a cash reserve to make sure that they always had control and financial flexibility and freedom. Fourth was around having a waterfront property as a legacy property. And the fifth was a legacy endowment for their children. And, just a high level, are you on track or not on track? So 100% means you're on track. Less than 100% means you're not on track. And then over means you're above on track. And when we think about financial planning, ultimately the goal of it is so are you on track to do what you want to do? And if you're not on track, then understanding what are your options to get back on track so you can make the best decision for you and your family to ultimately achieve everything. That, in a nutshell, is really what financial planning is there to do. So if the first problem is poor planning, the solution is value-based integrated planning. So as I mentioned, understand your values and vision and your goals or milestones. Hopefully everyone watching this today has written down those as, draft one. That serves as your North Star. That helps guide your decisions and actions so you can live an intentional life as you go throughout various busy activities throughout the days and months. Now, the wheel on the right, this is 6 critical areas of everyone's financial life that should be included in a financial plan, or at least if you're developing an integrated financial plan. So the 6 areas, we'll just touch on them briefly. They're also on the website if you ever want to look at these. But financial management. So analyzing your current and future financial position. This is where also budgeting would partake. I think when we start off quite often in our careers, people may or may not budget, but when money's tight, budgeting becomes, very much talked about and so forth. As people progress in their careers, one of the challenges sometimes people have is sometimes they have enough money for their core living activities and such like that. So budgeting goes by the wayside. But what happens then is you might develop unintentional spending, meaning that when you actually go back and do an audit or a review of your spending for that month or quarter, a lot of times people don't even realize that they're spending X amount on certain activities, like it could be entertainment or meals or clothing or like coffees or whatever it had be. All those things are great things. The point is you want to be intentional with your money so it's going where it's adding the most value to you. And if it's not, would you rather use that money to fund something else? Maybe it's something for the children. Maybe it's a trip. Maybe it's, something else. Second area is tax optimization. Many Canadians, this is their biggest expense, right? So they pay a lot of money in tax, but quite often we don't focus on the tax optimization opportunities we have available to us. The third is around retirement planning. Now, retirement, that word can be used, many different ways. Financial freedom is often used, however you want to say it. But at some point, many people don't want to continue working, right? Or they can't work, right? There's not, many people in their 90s still in the workforce, for example. So if at some point you want to take a, reduced hours or remove yourself from your current occupation, how are you going to have the financial means to support your lifestyle? And what does that look like? Projected all the way out till, say, age 95. The fourth is on risk management. So managing risks when it comes to potentially uncertain events, an accidental death, accidental critical illness that comes up, loss of employment, or what about risk from the market? We have seen throughout time, markets and investments generally don't just go up, right? So one of the questions that I ask is, or people quite often ask me is, do you think there's going to be another market correction? And I always say, it's not an if, it's when. If the history repeats itself with all the data we have is likely to do that, we will likely see future market corrections. And how are you going to prepare and manage that risk? No one's got a crystal ball in terms of the timing or how big, but be prepared for those to happen. Another one is estate. So when you're looking at, okay, depending on your age, do you have wills, power of attorneys, personal directive documents? Do you have legacy planning? Do you have a strategy to deal with the potential massive tax impact that comes at death? Or is there a transition of property like cabins or things like that to your kids that you want to have done, or charities? And the other aspect is on investments, right? So this is the tool that's quite often used to fund a lot of the activities or events in your life that you want to have financial means to do so. So how do you preserve and grow those financial assets? So 2 takeaway thoughts on this is, 1, ask yourself, are you on track? Whatever your values and visions that you wrote down in your milestones, are you on track to achieve that? And I'd really suggest you write down a yes, no, or maybe. There's really only 3 answers to that question, but write it down. If it's yes, pat yourself on the back. Awesome. Sounds like you are headed in a good direction. If it's no, think about, do you know what your options are to get back on track? Or is it just a big question mark and you don't know? And the third, which is the most dangerous answer, but be honest with yourself, is I don't know. And that happens quite often. That's probably the number one answer I hear from people when I'm doing these presentations is they don't know if they're on track. And if you do have a financial plan, think about when was the last time it was updated. If it's longer than a year, I'd suggest it's already outdated. So problem number two. So once you have your values, visions, milestones, kind of a roadmap created, now let's talk about the tools or the investment component that's used to fund to help you achieve all that. Now, one of the second biggest problems that many families have is they have inefficient investment portfolios. So I had a question from a presentation just a couple months ago, and someone was asking me, okay, I get the planning, I get the investment side, we have investments, but how much do you think we actually need? Now, that will come out in the planning process in number one, but just as a really high level, I put this slide together to give people some context of dollar values. So this is an estimated investment portfolio value that someone at 55 years old would need to have an after-tax income of the values that I'm putting here. So if someone's 55 and want to have an after-tax income, including old age and CPP, of $100,000 a year, they need about $2 million saved. If someone has a quality of life or cost of living that requires $250,000 of after-tax income, they'll need about $6 million saved. And if someone's living off of $500,000 of after-tax income to afford their lifestyle, they'll need about 14 million, right? So it's not a small dollar value that is needed to quite often replace a person or a family's income to maintain their similar quality of life that they want to do. So there's two independent researches studies that I reviewed, one from Vanguard, which is one of the larger investment firms in the world, and another from Russell Investments, which is also a very large investment company. And they both concluded similar results in the fact that many investors are routinely giving up about 3% of their portfolio values for four common mistakes. Now, when we're talking about percentages, 1%, 2%, 3%, sometimes it's hard to gauge what that actually means. So did a quick graph on $1 million portfolio, and what would the loss be at 3% compounded over 30 years? That's over $1.4 million. Okay, and that's just at $1 million, right? So if someone has a $2 million portfolio at retirement or more, the risk and the loss can compound even higher. So this is a really big problem impacting families. I don't know too many people that wouldn't appreciate or need an extra $1.4 million to help out them, their family, the community, or others. So the four root causes of why many investors are giving up this return is for these four things. Number one, poor planning, which we just discussed. Number two, inefficient investment portfolios that we're going to be discussing right now. And the concept around that is really based on lack of diversification and still investing in an outdated investment philosophy around stocks and bonds versus what institutions and ultra high net worth families have been doing for decades. Number three is limited tax minimization. As tax is one of the largest expenses for most of us, we're forgetting to optimize that area of our personal lives. And number four is missing advice. And unanswered questions and missing advice quite often leads to costly mistakes. So in the independent study by Vanguard, one of the interesting things that they came up with and shared is over 88% of the returns and volatility that an investor experiences is not attributed to individual asset selection. Okay, what that means is the risk and returns that you're receiving is not based on, did you pick stock A or stock B? It really is focused on diversification across asset classifications or asset allocations. So a different asset allocation, for example, stocks would be one type of asset. Fixed income or bonds would be another type. A third type would be private real estate. You could have private debt. private equity. So these are all different buckets, right? And the word diversification, I think, is also quite often used differently by different people. So really important to know, biggest driver of returns and volatility is attributed to, again, asset allocation, not the individual security selection. So that outdated approach that I mentioned that's impacting a lot of Canadian families is because they're still invested in just two asset classes. You know, the two asset classes I see all the time from families that are, you know, having a first introduction with me is stocks or equity and bonds or fixed income. And they might have mutual funds in there or ETFs and different funds that wrap this, but essentially they still just have investments in the public stock market and the public bond market. And it opens them up to two big challenges and risks. So the first is a market correction resulting in you losing a ton of wealth. And we've seen many instances, the last, you know, coronavirus market correction, which was short-lived, but still had a significant drop. We had a 2008 financial crisis. We had the 2000 tech bubble burst, many times and throughout histories where the markets have corrected significantly. And the second big challenge and risk with this approach is you might not be getting the returns and growth that you need to achieve that vision that you had written down. So let's take a look at how pension funds, kind of institutions, and ultra high net worth investors have been investing for decades. This is not something new that I created. This is a tried and true approach, and it's really interesting because it's very different than how the average Canadian family has been investing for the same time period. So when we look at the average Canadian family, as I mentioned, quite often it's stocks or bonds, right? And there's quite often funds in there that make up those investments, but it's essentially a stocks and bonds. And depending on the age and risk category, you know, an individual might be told, okay, you'll be 80% stocks and 20% bonds, or you're getting closer to retirement, let's reduce the risk, so let's put only 60% stocks and we'll increase the bond allocation to 40%. It's still only two asset classes, or, you know, two colors on this chart. So what happens if, you know, one of those or both of those falter? There's no other opportunities for you to generate cash and growth in the portfolio. Now, if we look at two other groups, you know, high net worth Canadians, this is through Tiger 21, which is a consortium of ultra high net worth individuals, quite often with portfolios over $20 million, and they share how they're investing their money. And what you can see is each color represents a different asset class. And instead of just two colors, there's multiple colors. Same thing with the Canada Pension Plan. Many Canadians are involved in the Canada Pension Plan and are aware of its existence. They publish in their annual statement how they invest their funds. And you look at the colors on their chart. It's very similar to how the, you know, ultra high net worth individuals have been investing for the last number of years. And they do that because the diversification helps them achieve their goals and weather storms when it comes. So take a second to reflect, think about your own investments, your own portfolio. What is the biggest challenge you have with your investment portfolio? Okay. For many people, there's usually a couple things that they wish would be working a little better or smoother. But, you know, write down one or two things. What are some of the challenges you're having today and potentially in the future? So as you're writing down your challenges that you might be having with your current investment portfolio, let's take a second to talk about why do so many Canadians and so many families get offered and told and invested in that cookie cutter stock and bond approach if our own Canada Pension Plan, institutions, and other high net worth investors are investing completely differently? Well, it really breaks down to three main reasons. One is licensing. And a lot of Canadians don't realize there's different investment advisor licenses in Canada. It's not just one, okay, you're an investment advisor, everyone's the same. The standard investment advisor license, which most advisors in Canada are under, allows them to talk about stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and ETFs. Okay, so not surprising, that's what you will often see in many Canadians' portfolios. To be able to offer some of the private and alternative investments to all Canadian families, you need to have the top investment license in Canada, which is classified as a portfolio manager. And there are very few, I should say, there's much less portfolio managers in Canada than there are investment advisors in Canada. Okay, to become a portfolio manager, there's specific education requirements you need to hit. There's specific actual experience requirements you need to hit. There's sponsorship and so forth. So that's one. Two is the relationships that individual or that team or that advising group has with other investment companies. So when you're thinking, of a family that wants to invest, for example, in private equity, and they're competing against things like Canada Pension Plan with billions of dollars, or the Ontario Teachers Pension with billions of dollars, how do you get a seat at the table? So aligning yourself with someone that has the relationships to be able to get a seat at the table to even get access to those similar types of investments can be very challenging in Canada. And the third component is with the top level of licensing in Canada, it also grants the advisor and the client the relationship called discretionary management. So discretionary management means that when you're working with your advisor, you align on what your values and your vision and your risk tolerance is, and the advisor then trades on your behalf. Okay, so why that is very beneficial to a lot of Canadians and why many Canadians don't have this. If we look at this quick graph here, here's just an up and down of the market. This is just purely illustration. What quite often happens to many people in Canada is just with a regular investment advisor license, the advisor needs to call you or the client every time they want to make a buy or sell. So if you think an average investment advisor has many different clients, they have to start somewhere on the calling list. Where do you think they start? Logic would dictate they probably don't start with the smallest accounts. And you can think about where you fit in the pecking order of all the clients' accounts. So what quite often happens is the first person gets called, hey, we got a great opportunity. We want to sell this investment, and then we want to buy something in. So they start making their calls and call, voicemail, missed call, you name it. And you have to be able to talk to the person to book the trade. And what happens during that time is the selling opportunity erodes. The initial price that you want to get out at, now the first client that got out of it is very different than the last client. And likewise, when you want to buy back in or vice versa, the same thing happens. You call people and the first person you call and they pick up the phone gets in at a very different price than the last person you call. So this creates a lot of unfairness just in terms of the clients that are being serviced by that person and potentially hindering your portfolio. Where do you fit in the overall pecking order and how often are you getting called or not called? And that also impacts minor decisions for reallocation. If it made sense to reallocate a small percentage of funds, would an advisor necessarily call every client to do that? Or do they maybe hold a little more cash and wait till a bigger opportunity comes? So you can see the disconnect in terms of your best interest by not having a portfolio manager that it provides discretionary investment management here. So one of the questions that I'd recommend you write down and ask whoever you're working with that's helping you on your investments, or if you're doing it yourself, is does the person have a portfolio manager license? If you ask any advisor if they're a portfolio manager, it's a yes or no answer, right? There's not a lot of gray lines. If they don't answer yes, then they likely don't. If they call you every time that you need to make a trade to buy or sell, they likely don't, right? So again, another opportunity for some and a challenge for many people that they're getting investment advice at different times. They're getting similar products maybe to other clients that you're working with in that firm's group at different opportune times. It's costing you money and maybe making you less. So solution 2 to inefficient, if the problem is inefficient investment portfolios, the solution is diversified portfolios. So when we look at diversification, I'm talking about diversification across asset allocation. So different types of investments in your overall strategy. So if the market goes down, do you have components that can still generate cash flow even if the stock market drops? 2 reflection questions on this big problem. One is, are your investments providing you the growth and cash flow you need? If they are, awesome. Again, if they're not, what are you going to do differently to generate that growth and cash flow that you need to achieve your vision? And the second question, which is really important, is what is your plan for the next market correction? Okay. If your portfolio looks like that average Canadian portfolio that I shared in a slide earlier with just two colors in it, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and some ETFs, when the market corrects, what is your plan? And hope is not a strategy. Problem number 3. So limited tax minimization. So the Fraser Institute conducted a study on Canadian tax, and they found that Canadians paid more in taxes than they do in housing, food, and clothing combined. And the top 20% of families pay more than half of all total taxes. So I think it's very easy to say tax is a big component of many families' spending. Now, how you structure your personal finances outside the investment portfolio and inside the investment portfolio can have a major impact on your financial future. So let's look at the after-tax difference on a $100,000 investment distribution based on the type of distribution that was and how it was taxed. So this is based in Alberta at the top marginal rate of 48%. So if that $100,000 was from a GIC or interest-bearing vehicle and it was classified as interest income, you'd only have about $52,000 left, right? So a lot of individuals lately that have been investing in high-interest vehicles, if they're in registered accounts and they can be tax sheltered, that's one thing. But if they're in taxable accounts or corporate accounts, you're almost losing about half of what you think you're making. Now, if that same $100,000 distribution was classified as capital gains, you'd be able to keep about $76,000. Okay, that's looking a lot better, more in your jean pockets. But what about return of capital? There's a third area that a lot of Canadians are not aware of, and there's different investment vehicles that can structure distribution this way. If you get a return of capital distribution, you can keep 100% of that distribution without tax until you grind down your adjusted cost base. So what that means, for example, for some of the investments that our clients have, is for about the first decade, and we generally structure that in retirement. So if someone retires at 65, maybe 65 to 75, they can receive some substantial distributions without having a huge tax impact on their life. And then after that, quite often the question I'll get was, okay, that sounds pretty good, but then what happens when the adjusted cost base is ground down to zero? Well, then it just turns into a capital gain, which is just your next most favorable tax treatment. So looking again at different investment opportunities in your overall strategy and how they're taxed and the after-tax impact to you and your family along your vision and your journey has a huge impact, especially when you include time value of money, meaning that you're not just usually investing for one day or 1 year. This is many years in the making. Even, if someone's 50 years old watching this, for example, is right now, many Canadians are living well into their 90s. So if you go 50 to 95, that's 45 years of still investment growth. Substantial amount of time. So problem number 3 is quite often a lack of tax optimization. The solution is to work with a designated accountant on your overall personal financial strategy to make sure that you're paying no more tax than you need to. It's not about paying necessarily less tax or looking for gaps or loopholes. It's paying your fair share, but not paying any more. And so many families pay more tax than they need to, eroding their wealth. So looking at your after-tax returns and distributions, looking at a growth strategy, if you're pre-retirement, looking at a withdrawal strategy. This is quite often missed. A lot of people focus on the investment side and they need to grow and generate the portfolio, but at some point they need to draw out from that as well. And what's the most tax opportune way to structure that so you can get the cash flow in your pockets and enjoy the lifestyle that you want to live? Looking at opportunities for income splitting. And there still are opportunities out there. And looking at other tax sheltered strategies, depending on your overall net worth and your overall, again, financial strategy. So the reflection question on problem number 3 around tax is really, has an accountant, designated CPA, reviewed your investment portfolio for tax optimization opportunities? And has someone tied that into all the other components in your financial life? So problem number 4, and this is also another big problem that comes up quite often, is missing advice. So you don't know what you don't know. Who's there to help guide you along the main decisions that you have to make on your road, to help you create the financial plans, to build the investment strategies, to help you and deter you from costly mistakes along the way? So one of the reflection questions at this point normally would break out into groups, but we're not going to do that today, is how does your relationship with money affect your financial decisions? And everyone has a different relationship with money. It quite often stems from, being a child and how your parents talked about money or interacted with money. It could then be impacted along your life and your journey on, how easy or hard it was to generate money, your employment situations, your savings, what type of investment path you are on. And personal finance is one of the most emotional components. So it's really important to reflect and think about it. Everyone has an emotional tie to money, but what is that for you, right? And how does that impact your decision-making ability? And if you're married, also have a conversation with your spouse and understand what their relationship with money is, because quite often it is different, right? And having these open conversations to learn more about each other and help guide, again, you on your vision, on your journey. So in a Vanguard study, they looked at 10 years histories for investors and found out that the average investor part of the study lost over 1% due to their decisions. Not necessarily the funds. They looked at the same funds in the study, but their decisions to buy and sell at different times. And quite often it was either fear, greed, or another emotional component that made them do that. So the complexity and the emotional component of personal finance, again, just acknowledge it. It is not something easy to do, and it can have costly ramifications and effects if not managed effectively. This is an example of the 2000 market correction, or sorry, 2020 market correction. You can see the blue line here, is the correction. And if you just left the money invested, what would happen? The gray line here is for investors that panicked in the March coronavirus, 2020 market crash and took money out, for a little over a quarter and then got back in when the market started coming back up, where they would be. And then the yellow line is the third, example in this study where investors panicked for almost a year before they got back in, right? So they went to cash, then they went back in, and what do they have? Now, this presentation, is not about, specific investment advice. You need to talk to, me one-on-one or your own advisor, but this is just an example using historical data to show, if no strategy has been applied, the S&P, this is broken down by balanced portfolio, 60% US large cap equities, so based on the S&P 500, and 40% of the Bloomberg US aggregate bond index. Okay, so that's what's used as a benchmark. Market went down, crashed, started at $100, went down to about 81, and over the course of the next 2 years, went on to increase and grow in value, finished at $133. The second opportunity, the gray, where someone took their money out for the quarter and then went back in, they'd only have $107. And the yellow, where they took it out for almost a year and then went back in, they would have actually lost money. So the point of this slide is really to talk about the timing effects of investment decisions and how they can create costly mistakes. This is just one example in a very short time period. Again, many people are dealing with 30 to 50 year time horizons on their investments. The decisions on trying to time the market and not having an effective investment strategy for them can be extremely costly and just really impacts how much longer they need to work, how much harder they need to work to be able to generate the growth and cash flow that they need to live the life that they want. Treat your finances like a business. So we talked earlier on about vision, and Jamie mentioned, a lot of businesses will have visions and missions and so forth. there's a lot we as people, as on our personal finances, we can look at what businesses are doing. So when we look at what business, and I don't mean we know we need to be robotic like a business, but I'm just talking about in terms of a strategic standpoint. Businesses quite often will have values, visions, and goals. And they do that to help them achieve and create success in what they're looking to accomplish. In your personal life, would highly recommend that you explore having values, vision, and goals, right? Businesses quite often have strategies and targets, right? And they look at forecasts and they say, okay, are we on track? Are we off track? What do we need to do to get back on track? No different in the personal finance space. If you're not reviewing this, I would say at least annually, as the bare minimum time to review your overall financial strategy, your plan. Are you on track or not? And for some families, you might even need to do it more than that. But always have that review. Know if you're on track or off track. And if you're off track, what are your options to get back on track? You might not choose to implement those options right away, but just having that knowledge can create that confidence and control in your financial life. Financial reviews and financial teams. So businesses have, again, frequent financial reviews. They quite often have a team. They might have a CFO, they might have an accountant, they might have a lawyer, they might have other individuals to support them on their journey. Who's supporting you on your journey? Who's that person that you can reach out to, contact, ask a question, get the valuable information that you need to know to make an effective decision for you and your family. So the concept here is there's a lot can be learned to treat your personal finances like a business. So if the problem is missing advice, the solution here is having a personal CFO. So what is a personal CFO? So a personal CFO is a professional that guides clients to achieve their personal goals by aligning their financial resources with their personal values and vision. Really just helping you succeed in what you want to succeed with. And this individual quite often wears multiple hats. So it's not just an investment advisor. Quite often it should be a financial planner, a portfolio manager, an insurance advisor, a wealth tax specialist, someone that can integrate all the components of your financial life together and simplify the complex for you. Why do you need a personal CFO? Well, I think as we were talking about the four big problems, the biggest answer here is, do you have one or more of the four problems that we talked about? If you did, then a personal CFO may be able to help you realign and make your journey easier. So the two reflection questions on this problem and solution is, one, are you receiving the advice and support you need to achieve your goals? And two, if not, what action are you going to take to change that? So we talked about the four big problems impacting many families today. The first being poor planning, the solution being integrated planning. We talked about inefficient portfolios and the solution being diversified portfolios. We talked about limited tax minimization and the solution being tax optimization. And we talked about missing advice and the solution being personal CFO, guiding you and your family towards success. We also talked about 6 critical components of your financial life that all need to be integrated together to be more efficient and effective in your financial journey. So whether you're working with someone right now or you're doing it yourself, you can take this as a blueprint to help you and your family on your journey and hopefully make it easier. So I'd say there's 6 key components to help make an unstoppable journey when it comes to personal finances. Number 1 is to identify your values, vision, and goals. I hope everyone did that today. If you are married, a spouse, close friends, if you're, family members, parents, talk about what you wrote down. I think the other thing we have quite often in society is we keep money and we keep personal finances quite often to ourselves as a detriment. People in our corner, spouses, close friends, family members, quite often they want to help each other. But it's very difficult to get help or give help if you don't know what that person needs or is even what direction they're going. So it's a great opportunity to share. Come home tonight and say, hey, heard this webinar at lunch. These are some of the values I wrote down and vision in this really interesting conversation. What are yours? Ask your spouse that question. I think, it can be a great conversation over dinner, and see where it goes. Number two, develop a budget. Budgets are not just for, when you're in university or your new job and you're trying to pay the bills and put food on the table. No matter what financial position you are in life, a budget can really help align your intentions. Okay. And it doesn't need to be, a fancy spreadsheet where you're budgeting down to the penny. When we're talking about budgeting, do you know where your money's going? Right? Like in big buckets: housing, travel, entertainment, leisure, kids, clothing, big buckets, money coming in, money going out. Is it all going appropriately in the buckets that you want? Or is there opportunities to be more intentional with that spending so that you can reallocate or deploy that money to have more enjoyment, more fun, more fulfillment in life? Number three, create a roadmap. So roadmap and financial plan really should dictate and help you understand what you need to do this month, this quarter, this year, this decade. Actionable steps. Okay, what do I need to do and when? And it's also used to make sure you can gauge if you're on track or off track. Implement solutions, number four. So once you have your roadmap, okay, how are you going to tackle some of the risks and problems we talked about? How are you going to develop a financial strategy that's best for you and your family to help you achieve that vision that you wrote down? Follow a system, right? There's a lot of emotion and complexity in personal finances, and systems and processes can help you through that. So it can be working with a personal CFO to develop systems for you, or develop your own systems, but have repeatable processes and systems that you follow along your lifespan to generate consistent results. And six, monitor, track, and update, right? So change is the only constant in life. Quite often, goals change, strategies change, life changes, economics change, politics change, changes all around us. So keep a pulse on your personal finances, measure it, track it, know what opportunities and options you have to get back on track if you're off track. And these six things can really help create control and confidence and clarity in your financial life. So I think we're just over, hour and a bit right now. I wanted to leave some time for Q&A and some questions. Thank you so much for having me today, Jamie, and thank you for everyone that attended this time. But let's open it up right now to Q&A.
Awesome. Yes, let's do that. Thank you for everything that you went through. For those of you that are looking for the presentation and slides, Ryan has information on his website that's up, and also he's got his contact information, and we'll be sure to send this contact information and website when we follow up. So you'll have the opportunity to contact him or look on his website to get the related information. In addition, obviously, we'll have some certificates for CPD coming out shortly. So a couple questions. Let's start from the bottom of the presentation up maybe a bit. Personal CFO, a little bit of clarity on that. We had some questions come in from members on that as well. When we talk about personal CFO, you did go through it, but just to re-emphasize, what does that all include? I know that actually years and years ago, Jesse and I looked at having a personal CFO service even within Amplify that was kind of like a concierge, because one of the biggest complaints we hear from friends and clients and even personally is, you've got your tax person, you've got your wealth person, you've got your insurance person, you've got your private banking person or just your regular banking person, and you don't have anyone that's like getting them to talk. And then everything is like, oh, you got to go check with your accountant, and it just feels like you're just chasing professionals and chasing information. And then it's really quick for most of us to be like, never mind. It's just not even worth it, right? Because it's like, by the time I meet with you and meet with you and meet with you, and then I got to bring my spouse and I got to bring my business partner and I got to bring this person, it just feels like, okay, if I'm losing 3%, if we pull out a number that you gave, my time is worth more than that 3% I'm losing anyways. So just forget it. What are your thoughts on that? And like, are you actually doing concierge service yourself, Ryan, or where do you find that that's best done?
Yeah, great question. And Jamie, I think you answered it perfectly just through kind of asking the question. So that is a big problem that's impacting a lot of families is they currently right now don't have the time and or expertise to integrate everything together. There's quite often a team that they're working with. You mentioned accountant or lawyer and maybe some other people. Who are those actually tying, integrating everything together for that family, for that individual? And that's what a personal CFO does. So if we look at, this wheel that I shared with a couple times, personal CFO is right at the top, and it's kind of that quarterback integrating all aspects of a financial life together for someone. Quite often, it will include a financial planner, an investment advisor, insurance advisor, might be a tax specialist. So at MRG Wealth, these are 4 hats, for example, I wear with my clients. But there's other professionals that need to be involved quite often with clients. Could be an accountant, could be a lawyer, could be another professional. So tying all that together, if we need to have meetings together, coordinate that and look after the client's best interest. That's what a personal CFO should be doing. The other aspect that they do is quite often all these professionals speak a different language. So I tried to use simplistic words. I apologize if I use any words in this discussion today that someone might not have understand. Please shoot me an email. Let me know. I'm always happy to have a conversation and simplify it. But really, it's that liaison between the different languages. Accountants speak accountantese and quite often have their own language. Lawyers have lawyerese and speak their own language. The investment profession quite often uses acronyms and has their own language, you name it. So to really simplify it and say, okay, client or family, here's your challenge. Here's where you want to go. Let's help you get there in the most efficient and effective way. That's what a personal CFO is there to do. And quite often, a qualified personal CFO should have a wealth of experience in different aspects of these. So, for example, myself as a personal CFO, Jamie, you mentioned earlier on, I'm a designated accountant. So I'm a designated accountant, investment advisor, I'm a certified financial planner, I'm a licensed insurance advisor. I wear multiple hats and have multiple experiences in different aspects of a family's financial journey.
Awesome. And I think that, you mentioned your team does this with the multiple hats that you wear. And then obviously there's some firms in town where this kind of speaks to the shared wallet idea, where obviously if you put your insurance and your wealth and your banking, etc., all within one institution, the idea being that you are being served under one umbrella and have a bit more of that personal CFO opportunity than if you have insurance with company A and banking with big bank number 3, and then wealth at like another advisor, right? And when you have it all split up, it just has that much more opportunity to be time consuming and disconnected.
Yeah, and I think the important part is having the trusted relationship, right? Because you can still have, so for example, we'll work with a variety of different companies. You mentioned insurance. We don't just use one insurance company. We'll have, depending on the need of the client, what they're looking for, insurance with different major insurance companies across Canada. Investments, again, we're building out strategies that are quite different, but that connection with a trusted personal CFO to tie all that in is really important. Banking, quite often families will have multitude of different bank accounts. If they're business owners, they'll have corporate bank accounts as well. So it still can work really well to have different components. The important part is all those components are integrated and that you have a trusted professional that understands your values, your vision, your roadmap, and guiding you along the way. And of course, the client or yourself has trust with that person. So they can pick up the phone even when it has things not directly related to, for example, investments. I have clients that will pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm looking at buying, a real estate property. I know this has nothing to do with the core portfolio, but can we have a conversation about, X? And yes, let's have a conversation. This is part of your overall journey. Let's tie it in. Accountant conversations, you name it. There's so many different components and complexities in personal finances that can be simplified by having a trusted person in your corner.
Excellent. So my next question that I'm looking at is, the Tiger 21 group that you showed had multiple colors, which imply different types of assets. And you went into the details of how a classic investment advisor or investment portfolio is really 2 types of assets. But what evidence shows is that people who are actually of a high net worth or wealthy or what have you are going to be much more variety of asset types, and similarly would a CPP or any type of fund have a bigger variety of asset types. So the couple questions on that is, obviously one of the issues is that you need to be an accredited investor to actually invest in some of those colors, I think. So can we talk a bit about that and how you could be limited if you're early in your investment, or maybe your net worth is very much put into one place, so you wouldn't qualify as an accredited investor, despite the fact that you're not early in your career or your buildup of wealth, because it is pretty specific. So people that might be considered wealthy or what have you are still not accredited investors. So let's talk about that a bit and how those limitations could prevent you from actually achieving this goal, and what you could do to get around that or work a plan to get to where you want to go.
Great question, Jamie. So you mentioned accredited investor. So I don't want to get too technical in this conversation, but that is a barrier for many families. Number one, they might not, or people, they might not even know that these other investments exist. And then if they do know, they go to their advisor and they say, hey, I'd like to learn more about this and see if it's a fit for me. But if they're not an accredited investor, and there's specific requirements depending on the investment, the province, and so forth. But really high level, quite often one of the requirements is to have $1 million of investable assets, right? And if someone doesn't have that, then where do you go and what do you do? And the solution for that is, if you're working with a portfolio manager, quite often you don't need to be an accredited investor. So because of the licensing, again, that's one of the higher licensing in Canada, it creates what's called a fiduciary duty of care to the client, similar to a doctor, lawyer, accountant. And because the team or the person is a portfolio manager and has a fiduciary duty to that client, even if that client wouldn't qualify as an accredited investor on their own, the portfolio manager can still talk to the client and potentially offer, if it's a fit for them, those type of investments and get them access to it and sign off on their behalf. So there are opportunities for families to get access to these, even if they're not a accredited investor. The important part would be working with the right professional, right? So are you working with a portfolio manager, or are you just working with an investment advisor, right? So that's one aspect. The other aspect, as I mentioned when we were talking briefly, is getting access to these investments, because quite often high caliber investments there's competition for it, right? So if a family is looking at trying to invest, I don't know, maybe 50 grand or 100 grand into one component of this investment, and they're fighting against the Canada Pension Plan or another institution with billions of dollars, very difficult sometimes to get a seat at the table. If you think from a investment perspective, the person that's actually offering the investment, do they want to sell, $4 billion worth of investment to one person, or do they want to sell hundreds of thousands of chunks at 50,000? Logically, it's a lot easier to sell to the ultra high net worth, the institutions, and the pension funds that way. So building relationships to get access to the quality investments out there, also at institutional pricing, because pricing changes along the way. Now, again, don't want to get too technical, too complicated, but the two big things I'd say for people watching: are you working with a portfolio manager? And you ask the person straight out that you're working with, are you a portfolio manager? They'll say yes or no. If they try to mention anything else, they probably are not. And two, do they have the relationships built up in the industry to be able to get access to these different types of investments? Now, and then third, I guess, would be, just because different investments exist doesn't always mean it's the right fit for you. So again, going back to your vision, your roadmap, your risk tolerance, your timeline for growth and cash flow, all those need to be taken into account when you're building out a proper wealth strategy for you.
Yeah, and I think, well, one of the ironies, of course, would be the most portfolio managers also have a minimum, which is probably not that far off from the accredited investor minimum. So there's some irony in there, obviously. But then I guess the other question is, a lot of those investments, like those private equity investments or what have you, they also have a minimum, which would allow for less diversification potentially, because in order to, anytime I get one sent to me, it's 100,000, or, that would be like at the lowest level. And so obviously if I'm putting 100,000 into one fund or one private investment, that could be a very material big chunk into one thing. And so, you know, obviously when we're looking at your high net worth and those Tiger 21s, those are, would they be billionaires, millionaires? Like what type of worth are those people?
Everything mixed in, but generally starting point is $20 million of investable assets and up. And
Yeah.
then a big range from 20 million all the way up. To answer your question, though, I think that ties into part of the answer and why it's so important to have a personal CFO is, again, to break up some of these barriers and these roadblocks impacting families. Now, you did mention, you know, quite often portfolio managers and teams will have minimums. And working with my team on the investment side through MRG Investments, we do have a $500,000 minimum. Now, it's far cry from, you know, the pension fund style, Tiger 21, those type of minimums. So if a family, you know, spouses combined are $500,000, we've developed processes and systems and relationships to be able to get access to a variety of different investments, provide a personal CFO service, and be able to do that for Canadian families.
And
So
the
we
personal
tried.
CFO services would be included in your overall package, not separate.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So you had the slide up that was retiring at 55 and how much it costs. And of course, my gut reaction is I think it's a fear tactic because who's retiring at 55? Which brings me to a moment that I'm going to brag for a minute. I had the chance to see Jim Collins last week, but a coincidence is I was thinking about what he was saying in his presentation. And his story actually was about the Vanguard founder. And of course, a lot of the data that you brought up today, Ryan, was from Vanguard. So I was like, oh my God, this is such a weird world that we live in, that everything's interrelated. And so one of the things that Jim Collins was talking about in his speech to WPO members last week was how, you know, a lot of these WPO members were focused on exits. And he stopped them and said, like, why are you exiting? Why are you retiring? And maybe step back and question whether that's the right thing. And then the story he told was about the Vanguard founder, of which he met within a month of the man dying. And I think he died at a very healthy age of like 88 or something like that. And he said how, you know, the man was quite clearly unwell in terms of being at the end of his life from a body perspective, but the fire in his eyes was so brilliant, and he was still so passionate about the business and the engagement and the work that he was doing, and he was still very involved in the work. And so I think, you know, obviously you're talking to people, they're building up a retirement plan. It's obviously in your best interest, Ryan, to have them be concerned about that target and that retirement. But, you know, there's a lot of reasons to think that maybe people shouldn't be retiring as early as they suspect they should be. And that's not necessarily right for them from a health perspective. It's not necessarily right from an economy perspective. You know, the 65-year-old retirement was decided on when people died at 62. And we're now living much, much longer. It's not rare to live into your 90s, your 80s. And back then we were dying before that retirement age. So how do you work with clients about the realistic factors? Because, you know, not to keep rambling, but we always say, like, do you work to live or do you live to work? But do you work to retire or do you work to live? Like, you know what I mean? Why do we go all day, every day working just so we can retire? That's kind of crazy to me.
Yeah, and I think the word retirement, it'd be great if we just use a different word, because retirement means something different to everybody. Historically, it was one definition at least, was I stop work, I live off my investments, and I do what I want, right? But the word retirement or financial freedom or having control, whatever the person wants to use, it's really about, you know, going back to that one of the first slides I shared, what separates you feeling trapped versus free, right? And it's good, that answer is going to be different for everybody. And then tying into the first problem of vision, what is your vision for the life you want to live, right? For many people, it might not be the job or the work that they're doing today. Now, that doesn't mean they want to sit at home and be on their couch all day, but maybe it's being able to volunteer, give back, do something different, or a completely different profession or job that they've never done, but they're worried to do it because there might be a financial cost to doing something. They lose the family income that they need right now. So a lot of it ties back to control and freedom. So we use, retirement is a very common word in the industry, but I'd almost urge let's find a better word for that. And maybe it is around financial freedom or a different word, but every person is different. I think that's why going back to the vision and overall roadmap and strategy needs to be created for that person. So for example, I have clients that are still working well into their 80s. And they are, to your point, extremely happy. They fly, they travel, they're engaged. Now they're not working 40 hours a week, albeit these are, more part-time, but they're still working and they love what they do and they're having a great time. I have other clients that are in their 40s and want to remove themselves from the day-to-day grind of working and go sail around the world, right? And they'll still do something for the next probably 20 or so years, but they don't want to be forced to show up at 8 a.m., leave at 5 p.m., and do the job that they're doing right now. They want to have more control, they want to have more flexibility, and they want to have more freedom in their life. So it really depends on the person and the family and what they're looking for and building out an appropriate strategy for them. I have another client that decided, very successful professional, took a pause. So not retirement, not like took a pause, mid kind of career, traveled the world for 24 months, and now is going to go back at it. Right. So there's so many different lives that we can live. There's so many different things that we can do. What is that for each individual and being really true to it. So you can be intentional with your actions, intentional with your decisions, and ultimately achieve that vision that you want for yourself. So I think that the definition really is changing, Jamie. I think it really depends on the person, depends on the family. Many of the decisions or many of the components, though, when I talk to a variety of different people, there's a financial component to it. So by having, whether it be savings or a portfolio or, whatever that looks for, quite often creates the control and the freedom and the flexibility to live the life that person wants to live.
Yeah, and I think freedom is an interesting word to use in the sense of like, obviously you can have a plan, but then if you're not physically capable of certain things or mentally capable of certain things, freedom implies that you have the freedom to deal with those types of issues that are not necessarily part of the plan.
And freedom can mean a couple different things for different people too. Like again, there's another word. Sometimes freedom we can talk about as we tie into retirement, where okay, I have a nest egg of money, it's generating enough for me to cover my living expenses and my lifestyle, and I have passive income coming in. Right, that's one option. The other area of freedom is freedom of concern and worry and thought, because there's a lot of people out there and a lot of families that don't have a plan, that don't have a clear strategy, and they're worried about, am I going to be okay? Will I be able to afford, to take care of my kids and put them through university or college? Will I be able to retire one day? What will that look like? How do I make the decisions in the next, quarter or next year? So there's immediate tangible benefits just from a health perspective too, by having control over your finances and be like, okay, I might not be able to, have everything I want today, but having a clear plan and strategy with actionable steps gives people that control and clarity as well, that they're going to be okay. And that can change a trajectory for a person.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think plan, you mentioned it a bit when you were talking about budgets as well, like the plans, the budgets, those can be dependent on the person and the family in terms of how much detail you're getting into and how far out they go, etc. But I think one point that's worth re-emphasizing that you brought up is the need to write down the plan, not just to have it in your head. And for most of us, there's a shared plan component, right? Whether it's your spouse or whomever you're sharing that plan with. And I think I've told this story before, but just to bring it up again, I think different people deal with money in different ways. And obviously, a great relationship probably has people that do deal with money in very different ways. That's probably additive to their lifestyle and to their perspective. But you have to recognize that within a relationship and within a plan. So, for example, JD and I, my husband, I had a plan and I thought it was clear. And obviously, I deal with money on a regular basis in my job. My husband is probably better with money and math and all those things, but he doesn't deal with money and budgets in his everyday job. So what was interesting to me is we went to our financial advisor meeting, and I sat, and I've told the story before, but still it's worth mentioning. We sat down, and it was during COVID, so there was all these people on video, and there was like 7 people showed up. I think there was a CP, it was all those people in your wheel, actually, Ryan. So there was like the insurance person, the wealth person, the lawyer, the accountant, like there was like literally 5 or 6 people. And my first thing that I said to them was like, oh my God, there's obviously been a miscommunication. We do not have enough wealth that you should be bringing this many people to this meeting. Like, this is bad use of resources. Anyways, it was a great meeting. And in the end, we got this little glossy that was our plan, the exact plan that you're talking about, Ryan. It had all kinds of details. It was very well done. It was very professional. And my perspective was kind of like, oh, great, you stole my watch and then you showed me what time it was. I'm like, this is pretty bloody obvious, you know? So I didn't really see that big of value in this plan, to be honest with you. But I will tell you that it's changed our marriage for the better, because there's a lot of value in this plan for my husband. And there's a lot of value for us to have something that's understood and written down and can be updated and can be referred to. And so I tell that story because a lot of people that join us are potentially more like me in the sense that they're CPAs, and maybe they think, well, I don't need a plan, or I don't need to write it down for various reasons, in terms of they have it in their head and the picture's clear, or what have you. But just remember, there's usually more than one person in the plan, and it could make a big difference to your relationships or your marriage as well. So, and everybody looks at money different, and money's incredibly emotional. And I think we talked about that many times, Ryan. But money is an emotional thing for most people. It's triggering for most people. That's what makes selling Amplify financial strategy services so tough, because entrepreneurs and business owners, it's an emotional conversation, but yet it's about numbers and money and frankly, things they hate. And I'm sure you experienced that too, Ryan. And I think we all have to recognize our relationship to money. And chances are it's not the same as the people that are on that bus with us, right?
Absolutely. And keeping that communication open, or even opening the door for communication, is foundational. Part of the process, you know, as mentioned on that first problem, hopefully everyone that's listening to this tonight, if they do have a significant other, or if they don't, a close friend or a parent that they can go share, what are their core values, what are their vision? You might be surprised that the person that you share that with is extremely thankful that you took the time to share that with them. And it might have never happened before, or it might have been years before you've done that before. And then they get the opportunity to also share with you. And that can really change a trajectory. Quite often in a family unit or in a relationship, as Jamie, you mentioned, one person has different relationship with money than the other. One person has different strengths, the other person has and different weaknesses, and the other person has different strengths and weaknesses. So helps them be able to leverage each other's strengths together to move forward in that direction. Whereas without that, and people are kind of siloed, even if they're in the same house, it's much more difficult, and people end up working harder and longer than they likely need to.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly it. It's bringing different strengths to the table and leveraging those, right? I mean, I would be lost at Amplify if I didn't have Jesse, and he looks at money very different. We share the same values and vision, but the way we perceive it and understand it is so different. And obviously at home, I would, well, I'd be bankrupt if I didn't have JD. I would just spend it all. So it's really, really key to have those people to lean on and to balance you out. I think, I'm lucky enough to have one at work and one at home, and it's really a big deal. You know, as you mentioned too, I guess the other thing is, as we go into second generation or estate planning and etc., you know, there's going to be differences amongst children too. And it's not necessarily like one's going to mirror the mom and one's going to mirror the dad. Like, I think about my own kids. I got one who's cheap as hell. Like, he is literally the cheapest person I've ever met. And I don't know where he would get that from. His father is frugal, but not nearly as cheap as he is. And then I got another one who's just like a total irresponsible spender, but also knows how to find money and somehow earn money. So, you know, I think I just look at them and I'm like, if this one doesn't marry someone that spends money, he is going to be at home and never leaving his house. And if this one doesn't find a responsible money manager, he is going to be like bankrupt rich, bankrupt rich, bankrupt rich. And so it's quite amazing because neither of them are like me and neither of them are like JD's. And we've got a house of 4 people and their relationships to money are honestly 4 different quadrants. And I think it's important to identify these things when you have shared plans and shared money.
Absolutely. And that second generation or the children aspect is another great opportunity. Everyone's got a different relationship, like you said. Quite often it's part nature, part nurture. And just like personalities, we're all different. But there's a great opportunity too for parents, once they're aligned and have their strategy, then to share and impart kind of like their wisdom and knowledge to their children. No one knows their children better than the parents, right? So you can learn something at school, you can read a book, you can bring them to a meeting with your financial advisor. But like you just shared, the personality differences between your 2 kids, and be able to have parents instill some of the honest mistakes that they've made. I think that's the other really important thing that sometimes we don't do enough in society is we all make mistakes and we hopefully learn from them. But if we share those mistakes with other people that we care about and being a little bit vulnerable and say, hey, when I was your age, I did this, or, I see you going down this path, just, do you want to talk about it? And opening the door, like there's, pros and cons to each of those decisions, and have a little bit of experience in that. Do you want to have a conversation about that and what that looks like? And hopefully be able to help guide and make, again, that journey easier for the next generation. Changes in socioeconomics quite often change as well, like between, one generation to the next generation to the next generation, depending on how tight money was, or, what the budgets look like for the family, what activities did they do, how often did they talk about money. All of those things can kind of shape perception and behavior in the future.
Absolutely. So we had one member ask, what net worth level would make you make it worthwhile having a family trust? And would you recommend family trusts for people who are in employment situations? Obviously, we've had our tax session at AHA and we understand family trusts in terms of planning from a business perspective. But if you're not a business owner and you're not doing it from that angle, does a family trust make sense? And what would be the trigger to make you look at it and explore that idea?
Yeah, it's a good question. And there isn't a cookie cutter, here's a number, go create a trust, or, do this, do that. That's where it really ties back again to having someone that you trust to support you on this, build out a plan. So does it make sense for individual or employee to have trust? Depends what you're going to put into it. It could be financial. It could also be emotional. It could be a cabin, a legacy property that you want to pass on. There could be other components of the trust. There could be children involved, or there could be, a multitude of different reasons to why you'd want to create a trust. And I think it's important to understand what is the challenge that person or family has. And then once the challenge is understood, understand the goal, and then the strategy comes out. I think anyone else that's trying to pitch a product, a trust could be a product, an investment fund is a product. Products are just tools. They come last. So analogy quite often I'll use is like building a house, right? So if someone says, do I want to build a bungalow or a 2-story? Well, it's like, hey, first, what do you usually think about? Why do you want each? Then you go meet with the architect, design it. Do you want 1,000 square feet or 10,000 square feet? Where are you building it? Do you need it on piles? Is it on sand? Is it on clay? Are you going to live there in elder age? Do you need an elevator? Do you need stairs? So all those components need to be developed. And then you go down to say, okay, what type of lumber do I need? What kind of screws and nails and everything else? So when you look at the, trust, investment funds, all of that, that's, I'd say, is later down the conversation. The starting point is really understanding what are the challenges, what are the goals, and let's figure out what are your options at that level for each person. And it's going to be different.
Excellent. All right. Is there anything that you want to reinforce with us before we take off and finish off our Monday of the week after a long weekend?
Yeah, again, the one thing I'd like everyone to take away is please take away one thing from our time together and action it. Whatever that is for you. Hopefully you wrote down one nugget that can add value to you and your family and make your journey easier.
Nice. Well, thank you, Ryan. We appreciate that. And thank you, everybody, for keeping on for the full 90 minutes. We appreciate that as well. Just a quick reminder, up in the chat, you can find our next AHA with Amplify, which is HR, third Tuesday of June, and it's the last of the season, which this season has gone by so fast. And we also have the May 30th birthday celebration. Amplify is 5+ years old, and we're going to be thanking all of you and many others for the contribution you've made towards our business. So please be sure to sign up for both of those. Thanks, Ryan, so much, and hopefully we see you soon.
Thank you so much, Jamie and Amplify, for having me today. Appreciate it, everyone.
Great. Have a good day.